Welcome everyone watching. This is the EJM podcast, and today my guest is Mr. Nate Lewis, who I'm super excited to be talking to. He has a podcast and a kind of like a radio series. Correct me if I'm wrong in that, but
no, you're perfectly right.
Nice. It's called Raised on Rhythm.
Raised on Rhythm, yes sir.
Yeah, it's awesome. I've been dipping in and out of episodes since you started going with it, like what, back around last year?
Yeah, that was August 2020. Yeah, that I did my first interview, and it actually didn't come out for about 2-3 weeks after I did it because I actually ended up having to redo it. So if you look it up, it was the one with Brennan Mooring from Sea Life. And because when I first started, it was just like, all right, well, let me just, start by getting like other bands that we've played with on the show or something. And yeah, I had no idea what I was doing, man. Like I just went in there, I just winged it. And I was listening back to the first one when I was editing it, and I'm just like, this is not good. Like, so I called up Brennan and I was like, hey, my bad, bro. I know we talked for like 3 hours, but are you cool if I just like scrap this and like we, give it a redo? And I think it'll be like way better. And that, thankfully Brennan was like, forgave me on that one, and we got it. So we had a great interview after that. So it's cool.
Yeah, Brennan's a pretty cool dude. I've played music with him and stuff.
Yeah, you all played together in Forest Ray, right?
Yeah, he was in Forest Ray when I was doing Forest Ray for a little while, and he's doing a project called Sea Life. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, he's got Peyote Ugly. He's got Brennan is, he does the graphic design stuff too. He's actually helped me with graphic design for the podcast channel. So that's been really cool of him too. Like I wouldn't know what to do without Brennan because, man, like again, visuals, me, like, don't even know where to
Brennan's a really talented person. He's a great graphic designer and super good musician. So I'm glad we get to know him. But yeah, so basically you kind of started doing the podcast, and I'm just kind of curious, like what inspired you to kind of get going on that kind of stuff? Like, were you kind of into podcasts, or were you just really into the local music scene?
The funny thing is the last few years I got into podcasts because I was driving a lot of rideshare during those years. And sometimes, if I was like I wouldn't listen to them when I had passengers in the car, but if I was like between trips or whatever, I would like switch over to it. I used to listen to a lot of the Brilliant Idiots with Charlemagne the God. I used to listen to Yang Speaks, which was Andrew Yang. And I listened to a few. I had some folks, tell me like, oh, you should do like a local music podcast. And I resisted that idea for the longest time because it was just like, oh, another white guy in his 30s starting a podcast. It's like it just felt like really cliche, and I didn't really know what I would want to do with that. But after the pandemic started, and live shows all went away, and then, it's like as musicians, we had to try and like scramble. And like a lot of us were trying to do live streams or like anything to keep our music out there. And that was what it was. But, then, come May, June around there, I was really, honestly, man, it was after the murders of Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and all them, we had just in Seattle. I mean, if the music community I felt was already stressed before all that just like pushed us over to the edge to where a lot of us actually weren't sharing our stuff on social media deliberately because we were trying to free up that space for, what was going on with the protest, live streaming. That was like the only way people were able to get word out about what was going on with that stuff, because there was just so much sensationalism, in the media at that time anyways. But,
I remember some of that stuff for sure.
I know that's, that stuff I know is a little bit beyond the scope of this podcast, but
it's all good.
Getting back to that, I mean, I was just kind of looking at the scene then, and it was just like, man, like I felt very selfish doing what I was doing at that point, where I was just kind of driving back and forth to my practice space every other day and just, trying to play drums or keep some semblance of music in my life at that point. And it just felt like I needed to try to do something to give people a platform or get a dialogue going, at least, help people that I knew in the community that I was from, which is, bands playing music in Seattle, to get their voices heard and also, get their music out there too. So I had some advantages because I had already been working with audio for 15 years, so it's like everything that I needed to do the production work and stuff. It's funny because I've met people that have done podcasts in Seattle and elsewhere like that. I tell them what I do, and they're like, "Oh, that's so cool! Like local music podcast. I used to do something like that." I'm like, "Oh, cool. Like, what happened to it?" And they're like, "Well, like the person I was doing it with didn't really want to, work on it anymore." And I'm like, "Who was doing the audio?" And they're like, "That person." And I'm like, "Exactly." I mean, like from doing this, it can be like a very tedious and thankless kind of job to do all that production work behind the scenes for a podcast.
Yeah, I mean, if you know audio engineering, which I have limited knowledge in myself,
Yeah.
it's such a great skill to have if you want to start putting together this kind of stuff.
Yeah, that was kind of why I felt that I had to at least try with this. Like I had to do something with that because I felt like it played to stuff that I already knew pretty well. I just had to turn those skills loose on a medium that I think, that I felt would help other bands that I knew
Sure.
in the community and so forth. So that was really the motivation with it. And then kind of as I went along in the fall, I mean, I had some great interviews. I had some, flubs on my part and stuff like that. Like I was struggling as a journalist. like
It's not
I
easy.
yeah, I played drums, obviously, and I did audio engineering. I could produce the podcast, but sometimes it's like, again, just doing podcasting and struggling with like conversation or like interviewing styles, and everybody has a different personality. Um,
Yeah.
again, just driving so much rideshare and talking to different people over the years, I felt like I had a little bit going for me on that one. Like I felt like I could kind of, talk with different kinds of people in that way, but what I sort of realized when I was starting to do that is I would play songs from a lot of these bands too in the podcast because I wanted like people to actually hear the music. And after about 4 or 5 months of that, I started to realize like this is like a really fun music discovery tool. What if I started doing episodes that were just like a mix of different music from Seattle bands, but combined with the podcast medium where I could actually humanize it a little bit because I mean, we have Spotify playlists, like for sure, and stuff like that. But I always
Yeah.
just felt like when I would try to do those or send people a Spotify playlist, it's just like in one ear and out the other. It's just like,
It's so
um,
oversaturated. Yeah, I know what you mean.
yeah, and again, it's like when I was able to do the radio show, I could sort of combine those elements of traditional radio, with DJing and like, but actually like talking about the bands and shouting people out and sharing my experiences from sharing the stage with a lot of these bands to kind of help humanize the music. So it's not just like, oh, here's this sound I'm shoving in your face on a Spotify playlist. It's like, no, like these are like real people here in Seattle,
Mhm.
you know?
Yeah, I was actually really into one of your radio podcasts. It was like a
Yeah.
jazz based one.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
dude, you really crafted it from start to finish quite well. I mean, the whole
Thank you.
time I kept looking back at the artist list. I'm like, oh, who's this? Who's this? And I was like
Yeah.
trying to keep track of the chronology of it because the whole thing just had a really great mood to it,
Yeah.
and almost, at least a good half or more of the artists I had never heard of. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it's a great little thing you got going there, man. I'm into it.
Yeah. Yeah. I was it's funny what you mentioned the jazz episode because growing up I was educated as a jazz drummer. The performing arts high school I went to actually used to compete with Garfield High up here for those of you that are
Wow.
familiar with Seattle, like at the
Yeah.
essentially Ellington competitions. The first time I ever drove by Garfield High when I was up here, I was like, oh, that's like the Garfield High that like I had no clue. I didn't even know it was in Seattle. Um, so with the jazz ones, man, it was like that was just me trying to branch out, and I'm slowly working on a hip hop one right now too. Like I'm trying to like just stretch as much as possible with this stuff because I don't want to just be playing like obviously with like the garage rock and the dream pop scenes, I'm kind of in orbit of that stuff with Blade Palace
Mhm.
and filling in for Peyote Ugly, but it's like I want it to be all music, like all different kinds of Seattle music. We don't have to just, limit it to that stuff. It should be everything we can.
Yeah, dude. I think that's really awesome. You're kind of branching out into different genres because
Yeah.
not only is it important you want to kind of cover different things like hip hop and this and that, but it just it just makes it more interesting from a creator perspective too, and you don't feel like it's kind of easy to get into a grind with this kind of stuff too, where it can get
Yeah.
feeling a little tiresome. So it's good to keep it
Yeah.
fresh.
Yeah. But you know what? I mean, I gotta say, it's like, even though I've always kind of done the podcast is, like I'm not trying to make any money off it or anything
Mhm.
like that, but just giving that platform to different artists in Seattle has, for me as a musician, it's paid itself back in spades, like socially, in that just reaching out to these people. I mean, some of these bands, it's like, if you're familiar with if you've ever been a band trying to send out your record to a bunch of different radio stations or something and having it
Oh,
get
yeah.
thrown in the trash, like, 1,000 times or whatever. I mean, um, just that was part of what inspired me to do the radio series, because then just me like going out and just finding these tracks and just hitting these bands up, like, I'm not asking you for nothing. Is, yeah, I just want to play the record if that's cool with you. It's like, man, it's just like the responses that I get every time that I do that are just like, thank you. Like,
Oh, yeah, it's exciting for sure as an
yeah,
artist to
yeah,
get
it's
any
been
kind of
great.
coverage at all.
Yeah, yeah, and again, it's like we've done that in Blade Palace, where it's like we pressed up, CDs of our first EP, and only because it's like, every other college radio station would be like, we want a CD, we want something physical or something. It's like nobody listens to CDs anymore. But we did, like, it's like we did all that for them, only to have it, like I said, get thrown in the trash all the time anyway and stuff like that. So it's like that, me doing the radio series was kind of like me rebelling against that a little bit. I'm like,
Totally, dude.
we need to
I was
change
actually
this up.
wondering about that too.
Yeah.
Radio stations still require like physical media?
So, some do, and a lot of them put it in their profiles. Like I know with KEXP, that's a big thing with them,
Mhm.
and most other like college radio and stuff. And I get, hey, that's their platform, that's their rules. It
Yeah.
is what it is. Like I'm not trying to knock them too much for it, but like I said, I mean, for bands nowadays, it's like, very few people put out EPs or albums, like unless you're already well known.
Yeah.
The bands, if anything, in the last year, I keep saying this, have had to learn what the SoundCloud rappers and the pop stars have known forever now, which is like singles, 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 because you have, that's every one of those is a chance to get playlisted on Spotify. Whereas like if you put out a whole record or a whole EP and you just throw it out there for nobody, it's like, that's not really going to work. So, but if you're forced to put out singles like that, it's a conundrum for bands, because again, you can't send out like all the magazine, like the publications want a full EP, the radio stations want a full EP. And even in the last year, that's been a struggle. Like I was talking with Dan from Spirit Award about this on one of the episodes, and it's like
Mhm.
him just trying to do publicity for their latest record. It's like all these publications in the last year, like a lot of them had, writers that fell off and stuff, because like nobody's making any money anymore. And it's like if it was already hanging on by a thread before all this, like this last year was just like lights out. So
Wow.
yeah, it's been a brutal
Yeah.
year, man.
It's also challenging to just crank out. I mean, I've probably been a part of somewhere between 20 and 30 different releases
Yeah,
over
yeah,
the years, and it's
yeah,
just challenging to put in that level of creative output, and then when it doesn't explode or take off or whatever your expectations are, it's
yeah,
like,
yeah.
well, back to the grind, back to the practice room, and let's do it again. It's just kind of like,
Yeah, and it's kind of a disconnect, because as musicians, I mean, obviously we want to be making songs and we want to, jam and stuff like that. And then in terms of getting stuff out, it's almost like you have to just take the wholesale in that way and just figure out how to break it down to retail and, like free samples and stuff like that, where it's like people, like nobody's going to go from just like not having heard of you to just listening to your whole album back and forth. Maybe a few, but like, you
yeah,
know,
right.
it's kind of a challenge for a band of just figuring out how to like get your stuff out in like small ways to where people pick up on that, or they see it, scroll by on a feed and they're like, oh, what's that? And what's that? Like, oh, that's cool. Oh, I want to check out more. Oh, they got a whole album. Okay, let me check that out now. It's like, yeah,
Sure. Yeah, I feel like music marketing is one of those things that's constantly changing, which is kind of cool, but also
yeah.
challenging.
Yeah, the
But
last 20 years, like, I mean, that I've been doing this stuff, I tell musicians that struggle with it, like, do not beat yourself up about it, because it is very hard to predict that when the industry that you're in is just changing by the day. It's- even
yeah,
like
yeah,
2 years ago, forget it. Yeah, it's crazy.
yeah, more than anything, it's just sort of like, you have to make sure you're doing it for the right reasons, and
Yeah,
otherwise you're going to get disappointed pretty quickly.
yeah. At the end of the day, you got to have fun doing it, because in the end, that might be all you ever get out of it. So as
Exactly.
long as you're doing it for fun, then you got that. Like I love the way like Rob and Elliot write songs in Blade Palace, and working with Elliot and Brennan now too and stuff. It's like I enjoy the process of like taking ideas from them and adding drums to it and sort of bringing it to life. And me and Chris Wilkie, our bassist, like doing our best to record these things ourselves and just bring it all to fruition. When I hear the results from that, that's like the magic of it for me, and getting to play on stage with them, of course, when we could do that. I think we'll be able to do it pretty soon, but yeah, like
cool, man.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Well, I'm just kind of curious, while we're still kind of on the subject of podcasting, like what are some of the challenges, or like maybe even like potential pet peeves of creating podcasts or just working with different people?
Probably the biggest challenge of it, just in terms of the technical side, is just doing everything that I have to do to really bring some of those episodes to fruition, especially with video, because I started dabbling in that in November, December, around there and stuff, just hoping it would be like a discovery tool, like on Instagram and YouTube. And I mentioned this to you earlier, but it's like I've never been a video guy in my whole life. Like the whole reason I played music was so I could be ugly and still have people pay attention to me. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, yeah. So, man, that's been a challenge, because doing video on one of these episodes, especially with like 2-3 camera angles lined up in Final Cut, and having to do that, and then the audio, and then get the audio right and have that all pieced together and rendered down. It's like, people have asked me why I haven't done as many interviews lately. And I'm just like, man, if you only knew what I went through, like piecing those things together, it's crazy. I mean, some people just hit record on a Zoom call, and that, that's cool too, but
that's what I'm doing. But yeah, no, I've done some multi-camera projects, and it's like a juggling act.
Yeah,
it really is
rough, man.
There's something kind of zen about it, though, when you dial it in and you get the audio there, and then you know what's going on with the camera systems, and you can just kind of cut between different roles in Premiere or whatever you're using. It takes a little time, though, to really dial it in.
I could get in that zone with it, and I'll just start, and like 6 hours will go by. It's like dark outside, and I'm just like, oh shit, what have I done all day? And then I don't even know where I'm at sometimes in the timeline, and I'll zoom out and realize I only have like 2 minutes left to edit, which is like the equivalent of 20 minutes work on my part when you have 3 camera angles and 4 mics. So it's like, I'll zoom out and I'll be like, oh, I'm almost there, like, just keep going, just keep swimming, finding Nemo or whatever,
Do you just kind of set your own deadlines, or do you give yourself a little bit of flex?
Yeah, I've always set my own deadlines with that. And going back the last, 10, 15 years of my life, I've been pretty good about working independent that way. It was one reason I always did way better as a 1099 freelancer than I ever did like working as a W-2 for somebody else. Although I've definitely done regular jobs like that too. But like I say, I'm definitely a self-starter. Yeah, for sure.
Dude, yeah, you're doing all kinds of stuff. You're kind of like, you got your hands everywhere, man. You're drumming, you're potting, you're doing radio.
Yeah, and the last year I haven't had a job, so I got to go for it while I can, man. Like, who knows here in the next couple months, like when all this stuff picks up again. I'm at a point now, with the vaccination and stuff like that, where I'm kind of looking a few weeks out, and it's like, man, what am I going to do with all that? Like, I don't want to go back to the grind.
Yeah, I know you were doing the kind of like ride share thing, and that might be a tough one to get back into.
I'm debating over that, because a lot of my business before all this was just the night crowd, the bar crowd. I mean, part of why it worked out so well for me the last 5 years prior to the pandemic, when I was driving ride shares, because I'd spent 20 years of my life dealing with drunks and bars and stuff like that. So it was like, I'm sure, if you're listening to this, you've had those Uber drivers or Lyft drivers that, you'll ask them like, oh, do you work at night? And they're just like, no, I don't want to work at night. I don't want to go out there. I'm scared of those people. And I'm just like, I don't give a fuck. I'll take them. But yeah, that's, until the nightlife comes back, it's hard to say what I'm going to want to do with that. I've been very lucky in that I can, take some time away from that grind, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, what are some of the interviews that you did that you really are proud of, or maybe stick out for whatever reason?
Rachel Field was one of my favorites. For those of you that don't know, Rachel Field, she works at Resonant Mastering here in Seattle, with Ed Brooks as well. And I mean, she's mastered records for you go on down the line. I mean, all the way from, REPs and Blade Palace. We
Mhm.
met her because she had mastered Peyote Ugly stuff, but then she had also mastered, I mean, between her and Ed, I mean, they've mastered records for everybody from Pearl Jam, Thunder Pussy, like you know, all down the line.
Wow.
Rachel is an OG of the Seattle music scene for sure. She's worked with a lot of people. So, but giving her, getting back to your question, the
Yeah.
reason why I was very proud of that interview is because I had an opportunity to ask her about her experience in the audio field, because only about 7% of audio engineers are women. Um,
Oh, okay.
Women are only about 5% of record producers. Women are more likely to be represented as solo artists in the music business, but they're less likely to be a part of bands or ensembles, groups like that. So I mean, I had to kind of ask her, like, what was that experience for her like, coming up in that world? And that was an interesting response I got to that, because I really feel like, I was able to give her a platform with that where she could really open up about that and some of the things that she's dealt with being a woman in that business, just like, again,
Sure.
it could be small stuff like getting, picking up the phone at her business and somebody thinking that she's the secretary, or just like, shit like that, where it's just like, there's a lot of inequities, that I think need to be rectified in the industry. But the first thing that we have to do is start having honest conversations about what's actually going on with all that stuff.
Totally.
And I think me being able to ask her that question, because I was a dude, it's like you can't write it off as easy as if she was being interviewed by a female interviewer, or somebody like that, because then people would hear that, and sometimes I think there's a tendency to dismiss those conversations as, oh, that's just like women bitching amongst themselves or something like that. But when I'm asking it and I'm going to that subject, then like you can't write it off like that. So that was a proud moment for me. I mean, when I sent that interview to my mom too and stuff like that, I mean, my mom has her own history of dealing with discrimination in the
Mhm.
workplace in that way, as a woman and whatnot. But when I was able to send that interview to my mom and have her hear that and everything like that, it was just that was one of those times where I was just like, okay, this is good.
Right on,
I
man.
can I can feel okay about my work here. you know
That's awesome. Yeah,
yeah.
Rachel, I haven't checked out your interview with her, but I would definitely will. Um I'm
Yeah, and all this is to say, I should say too, Rachel as a mastering engineer, as a recording engineer, you have never met someone who is more professional to work with, and I can say that she's mastered two of our EPs in Blade Palace. I've, worked with her twice then, and she freelances around here in Seattle, just recording at other studios too and stuff like that. So, all the other stuff, that I just mentioned aside, I mean, she is on her game. So,
totally.
like,
Well, I've worked with Ed Brooks and he's always
yeah,
been super pro, and I
yeah,
can only imagine she's just as
yeah.
much, if not more.
Yeah, there's a reason why she went from just getting started in the industry about 10 years ago to, now voting on the Grammys, basically. Like she works, you know.
Awesome, dude. Well, cool. One last question about the pod stuff. I noticed you kind of like switched up your release days, and I was
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
curious about just that whole strategy of like releasing content on one day versus like the weekend versus a weekday. I don't know.
I was trying to get the radio episodes out a little bit earlier, because originally I was putting them out on Fridays. And it's just like, man, this is the day when everybody's already taking a half day anyway. Like, ain't nobody need this stuff when they're in the office. But if I put it out on like a Tuesday or something like that, at like 6 a.m. when, like blazing, some of these people I know that go to work as baristas and stuff like
Yeah,
that, they're all going off to work. They need stuff to listen to. I'm like, let me try and reconfigure that a little bit and see how it works. I don't know, it's hard to say, like, sometimes with that stuff how much of a difference it makes, but this is just how my mind works sometimes, where it's like, even if you told me it would make that 0.1% difference, I just get super anal retentive about that detail, and I'm just
oh
like,
yeah,
well, then do it. Like, whatever it is, whatever it takes to make it better, figure it out and do that and try to improve and learn as you go with this stuff.
yeah. Any edge you can gain is worthwhile, I
Yeah.
think. So
Yeah. And I'm not sure, honestly, like with the long form content, like the radio series, what's going to be going on with that versus like my short form stuff, like my Instagram reels. And I've been way more active on there, just because I feel like that, gets to people quicker, honestly. Like it's easier for people to absorb, sort of what
Sure.
we talked about earlier with that.
Okay, well, so
Yeah.
I haven't brought this up, but I wanted to talk a little bit about your band, Blade Palace. You're a
Yep.
fantastic drummer.
Thank you.
That's how we first met, is when we played a show or two together.
So Lo-Fi, if I'm not mistaken, was the first one, right?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I know we
Yeah,
played at
yeah.
least that show, and then the backyard party.
Oh man, yeah. That was a fun evening. Both those shows were a
Yeah.
great time, But yeah, man. I mean, it was Forest Ray, Blade Palace. I remember at Lo-Fi, it was Forest Ray, Blade Palace, Chrome Lakes, I think was on that too. And was Smoker Dad on that or no? There was a different band there.
No, I
I don't
don't think
fucking know either.
Smoker was on it, but
No, we played with Smoker Dad so many times. Like we always joked that we were smoked out. It's like,
was it not Batmobile, but there was like a surf band. I think that was a different show.
no. Tiger Rider, I think was it.
Okay, cool.
Tiger Rider was at that one Lo-Fi show, if I'm not
That
mistaken.
sounds correct. Yes.
Yeah. So
But let's talk a little bit about Blade and
yeah.
what's going on with the Blade camp. I was checking out your guys' last couple releases, and
Yeah.
the last one was called 1919, and
Yeah.
I thought that was awesome, really excellent recording.
Yeah.
And then the
Thank you.
first the one before that was called Disconnect, and that one
Yes.
was also very good and also very different, I thought.
Yeah, 1919 was a concept EP that Elliot and Rob just cranked out in 2 weekends in terms of the songwriting, where it was like very straight through and there was kind of a thematic to it. It was all based on different events from the year 1919.
Interesting.
Lattice Work was based on the general strike. Red Summer was based on, it's tricky for me to describe this and do it justice, but it was the case of a young black man who was swimming at a lake, and he, the current carried him to the white side of the beach, when it was segregated, and they just, they beat him to death, and it was awful what happened. And then there were, riots that followed up, in response to that. So Red Summer, you'll have to forgive me for blanking on some of the other details. Rob can talk about that a lot better than I can, with the lyrical content and so forth. But 1919 was a concept EP that was written with a bunch of those themes. The thing is, and the second song was actually about prohibition too, but it was ironic to us because, here we are 100 years later. And, again, I know this is a little bit beyond the scope of the podcast, but, we're still dealing with some of the same issues, on all three of those fronts. So, we did that EP only a few months actually after we put out Disconnect in July 2019. Disconnect was really some of the first songs that we wrote together as a band, or the ideas from Rob and Elliot that they had that I started playing when I moved up here in January 2018. So those were our first two EPs.
Cool. Yeah, I noticed a lot about both of those EPs, especially you guys aren't afraid to use dissonance in your music, which I'm a big fan of, always have been. And dynamics galore, lots of dynamics. So those are the two things that really stick out to me about, a band. If they're kind of turning my head,
That was something that I really fell in love with about the way that Rob writes songs, where, it's funny because when I was a teenager, I played a lot of pop punk and death metal. Even though I was educated as a jazz drummer, it was like a weird double life. And when I was a teenager, and I kind of got burned out on playing metal when I was in my early 20s because so much of it for me just felt like very, just very like 100 all the time in terms of dynamics. And I just got sick of every band practice almost feeling like a workout, whereas like the way that Rob writes songs and Elliot, I mean, they will have moments of intensity, but then there's moments of, just softer dynamics and it's all interspersed. And it keeps it very interesting for me as a drummer, especially, like I say, as I've gotten older and I enjoy music that ebbs and flows and has all sorts of different extremes in that way.
Totally. Yeah. The thing you were talking about earlier about the dynamic plateau or whatever, I call that white noise factor.
Yeah.
But yeah, it definitely serves its place. It's just, it's not the type of music that I'm necessarily attracted to or would want to participate in making. But
Yeah.
I'm a big Slayer guy when the time is right.
Sure.
But even Slayer breaks it down a little bit.
Yeah, I mean Slayer has those moments too, man. I was gonna say I never did ask you, man, or maybe I have, but it's like you were kind of you've been a metalhead on and off throughout the years, and it's like
I've dipped in and out.
that's what I'm saying. I've seen you playing. I'm like, what the hell's this guy doing playing in Forest Ray of all places? I was like, what the hell, man?
Hey man, a gig's a gig, you go where you're
True.
needed.
Yeah. I mean, it's Seattle too, so get it how you live. But
Plus you reach a certain age. I'm starting to enter the ancient category of local Seattle drummers, so you need a little bit of a reprieve from like cranking everything up to 11 all the time.
yeah. Well, and I noticed that as a drummer too, is that when I go through a lot of periods like that where I'm just playing music that's very high in dynamics or stuff like that, I actually become like a really shitty drummer otherwise, because there are all these muscles like in my forearms and stuff like that that only get worked if I'm going to play like at a softer dynamic.
Mm.
And a lot of times when I practice drums these days, like a lot of it'll just be me like improvising and starting off from a very, low dynamic level and kind of building off that. I never record this stuff, it was just personal, for myself. But when I play like that, I notice that I'm actually a much better loud drummer than if I were to like, I've had periods like that in years past where I've just played like a Blade Palace practice once a week,
Yeah.
and after, by about the second or third week, I feel, um, I feel stiff almost, or it's like I'm only playing at like one dynamic level. Whereas, like I say, if I'm switching that up, then it's like I feel much more consistent when I'm playing it, steady, loud dynamics like that.
Yeah, no. It's kind of weird. I try to practice rudiments, and that kind of
Yeah.
helps me
Yeah.
kind of keep everything
Sure.
even keel. But yeah, you're right. If you're just playing heavy stuff all the time, you tend to just get really good at that. And then if you're playing, obviously more dynamic music, you can kind of be more flexible.
You get good at it for me anyways. It's like I would get good at it and then I would get burned out, because it's like I'm just the playing is just becomes too one dimensional. I get in a rut,
It's
like
true.
that's one thing I used to love about playing live band karaoke nights. It's like, they'd have 2, 3, 400 songs on the list, and I would just go all over the place in terms of dynamics. And it would just, I could never get too comfortable almost in one style. I just keep having to change it up and adjust for the music and so forth.
I was just kind of curious because we're talking a little bit about playing different styles,
Yeah.
and how fun is it also to just be able to play a Slayer song and then like play some kind of swing jazz and then play some 80s.
That's a jump right there. When I was first doing live band karaoke gigs at a place called Metalsome in Atlanta, those of you familiar with Atlanta, it's at the Dark Horse Tavern. But I started drumming there in 2017. I played with them for about a year. And one of the challenging things to me about that gig was doing a song that was like, okay, it was like Sum 41 or Yellow Card or one of the more up tempo ones. And then immediately right after that, the next one would be like Alone by Heart or Total Eclipse of, the Heart, any one of those like slow ballads to where all of a sudden I'm having to go from just like, adrenaline on 100, to just like very relaxed. And not, I mean, I struggled sometimes, especially like towards the end of the night. A lot of times, like I would struggle so hard to make those kind of transitions. I think they would try, to their credit, they would try to arrange that so that it would flow a little bit better, but yeah, that was a challenge because I would play, like the White Snake right after we got done playing like Blink 182, and I was rushing so bad, on White Snake. It took me forever actually to convince my old boss that I wasn't on cocaine during those gigs. Because like I'm sorry to call you out here, Curtis, but it's like in his mind, the only way that a drummer could rush that bad is if they were doing blow, and it took me like 6 months to just be like, I don't do that. This is just like, I grew up playing punk rock. Like, I'm sorry, I have a struggled time, laying back, on like White Snake or, AC/DC or some of these other, like 80s metal songs that were playing, because I didn't grow up with that stuff. I grew up on like the Blink 182, the pop
Mhm.
punk. So when I got that gig, and and somebody would choose like My Chemical Romance or something, I'd be like, let's go, let's do this. And other times, they would pick like Poison or Motley Crue, and for some of the other people at that bar, that was what they grew up with. But for
Yep.
me, I had to struggle to learn all that stuff because like I didn't know the vocabulary. I didn't grow up hearing those songs on the radio 10 times a day.
Sure, sure.
Yeah, it was tricky.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I can imagine that kinda level of a catalog is probably pretty challenging to keep track of, but,
Yeah.
I mean, I played covers and stuff myself, and
Yeah.
once you dial it in, it's really, really fun.
Yeah. I mean, I grew up playing a lot of cover songs especially after I got out of high school, like the first real like residency gig I was doing, I was subbing for a friend's band. They were called Six on the Road. They were an Irish rock cover band. We used to play Beach Place in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and down there. I grew up in South Florida every Saturday and Sunday. And I mean, it was a fun gig and it was good money and stuff. And that was the first cover gig that I ever played in my life. Maybe not the first, well, the first one that paid decent. I'll put,
There you
put it
go.
that way. But yeah, I mean, I going back through those years and everything. I mean, yeah, like I was playing along to records. I played, cover songs and stuff like that. I enjoyed playing that stuff, live. I think, I've always played in original bands because I always wanted to you know, satisfy like that part of my creativity too. I actually feel like I had a hand in creating something and maybe trying to do what I could to push the art forward too, not just, playing songs from 40 years ago and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
Um, I do both.
Dude, the thing I notice about learning covers is it tremendously expands your skill set palette, I guess, as a player.
It depends on how deep into it you want to dive because you could do what some drummers do where they have kind of their chops already and they're just sort of improvising within the form of that particular song they're playing. You have more live band karaoke where there's the gigs I did where there's much more attention and detail. Like we really are trying to make sure that we replicate a lot of those parts to a T. We want
Mhm.
it to sound the way that people heard it on the record, on the radio back in the day. And then there's like tribute band level stuff, where tribute band is just like, okay, like everything, we're gonna dress up just like them to, like everything,
Yeah.
you're trying to give people like the ultimate experience without, having to wait 3 years and pay $300 for a ticket to see the real thing. Honestly, some of the tribute bands now are probably better than the original bands that used to do it 30, 40 years ago. If you get a good one. But yeah, I mean, that's a whole nother world of music and music making. And I appreciate it. Just like, I mean, it's a challenge, just like making original music. There's challenges to all that stuff depending on what you want to do.
I mean, I'm a fan of all of it. I like
Yeah.
making original music, and it's fun to learn the
Yeah.
classics and try to get something out of that too.
Yeah.
Problem with that is there's just only so much time. So it's like,
Sure.
what do you want to spend your time doing, right?
That's the struggle with me, man. It's like sometimes it feels like if I had time in the day, man, I'd try to do it all. I'd try to play with everybody and just for the experience. But man, it's like, yeah, there's only so many hours and only so much energy too. I can only play drums actually for about maybe 3-4 hours out of the day before I start to get, before I hit burnout. I could push it to 6 or 7 if I'm recording, in a session or something like that. But
Yeah.
even that, if I push it beyond like 7 or 8, like I'm gonna be dead the next day, or like just I'm gonna be so burned out.
Yeah. I don't think that's a good, like a healthy approach to going beyond that level.
Yeah, and I don't think you necessarily have to either. I mean, I definitely went through those times when I was young and 10th through 12th grade, in high school where I was putting in like a lot of hours behind the kid and learning classical percussion and just learning all this other stuff, just trying to be as good of a musician as I could, hoping that, if I was that good, then, I'd be fine. I could be a working musician and,
Yeah.
have that stuff kind of have the business and the rest of it kind of take care of itself. That was the dream when I was a teenager.
Oh,
That didn't really play out.
yeah.
But yeah.
Well, I mean, if you watch your playing, it's clear you've put in the time. I mean,
Yeah.
I was watching just a few minutes ago, I was watching you do that Queens of the Stone Age song. Um,
Yeah. No one knows. That was
no one
actually
knows. Yeah, no one
that
knows.
that was those ones, one of those ones too, where when I recorded that video, I learned the part to a T, or at least as much as I could on my own equipment. Obviously, I'm not using the exact same drums and cymbals that they used to make that record. Um, but I mean, I learned that one. There was a period in the summer, actually, spring, early summer before the podcast, where I was trying to do that and like push myself to put out like a drum video every week, content, right? Whatever,
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
like, oh, I made it like maybe 9-10 weeks before I got burned out on all that. And it's just like, oh, I'm like starting to hate this, because it just felt too routine. But
Yeah, that's what I was saying earlier about how it can kind of burn you out.
yeah, that was kind of, I mean, honestly, like I was thankful that I started the podcast in that way, because it felt like the podcast was a way to kind of stay relevant as a musician that didn't, force me to like turn, my drumming or music into like this contrived kind of thing where I'm just trying to come up with stuff every week. Not because I'm inspired or, because I want to, but just, for the sake of like, oh, putting out
Churning
another
it out.
content, but with the podcast, it's a lot funner because I can do that one every week in the radio series too. And then it's like, as far as like my drumming and Blade Palace and stuff like that, it's like, we'll put out the record whenever we're ready, but no need to rush that one just for the sake of
Yeah.
trying to get our
No, I
Instagram
mean,
popping.
it's really hard to find that balance, but
Yeah.
once you find it, it's so rewarding.
Yeah.
What I was gonna say though about that performance of No One Knows is like, dude, you had it down to a T. Like it was basically it was like an encyclopedia reference of that song.
Reference track, yeah. And in hindsight, the funny thing is I've done covers like that for a while, but in hindsight, what I should have done is I should have filmed it with an overhead angle, because I think that the audience for that stuff isn't so much, just regular people, so much as like drummers just trying to like, I mean, I used to look up videos like that when I would do, the live band karaoke gigs, like people that would have like reference videos. Cause like with the overhead angle, like camera wise, I could actually see like what was going on. I'm like, oh, okay. Like that's where that was going. Whereas like, if I'm just listening to the record and trying to figure out, it's almost like figuring out an algebra equation where I'm just like, okay, this is going on here, that's going on there. Therefore, like this must be doing that. Like, oh, okay. Yeah. That's how that part goes. And
Yeah.
Learning.
I love that song. Like that's a classic drummer song.
I keep forgetting about the song. I keep just talking about the process. It's like,
oh, that's cool.
Oh man. I remember when that song came out, like 2002. Yeah. That whole record, Songs for the Deaf, just kind of blew up and
same here. Yeah.
That was that.
What are some of your drummer? I mean, this is a really obvious question, but what are some of your kind of like drummer influences? I know you did like a No Effects cover. That's my favorite No Effects song, by the way, Linoleum. And then you did like a battle song, which is like another favorite band of mine.
Yeah, that's the No Effects one is like my biggest like YouTube success to this day, which like, oh my God. I mean, when I watched that video, it's funny. People on YouTube will still comment on it now. Like it just came out yesterday.
It's good.
I mean, I was just fucking around. I had just gone through a band breakup at the time. It's like, I was just fucking around like in my studio and I was just rocking out and having a good time playing. I think that's what people connected with, more than anything, more than the actual like playing and whatnot. But yeah, that was me like pushing that would be more like my limits of like those punk skank beats and stuff like that, where, I grew up playing like Blink 182 Dude Ranch and like half that record is that same damn beat, or something like that.
Yeah, it's true.
No Effects, again, where it's like, I can work up to that. I don't always have the chops to do it offhand, but those beats are so fast that it's like if I play through the record a couple times, I'll build those muscles back up.
Yeah.
But it's mostly just the right hand, honestly, with those ones. Like, it's not a blast beat, obviously, or something like that. That's a little bit different. But yeah.
It's kind of like that Ramones thing where your right hand just has to be a mile a minute.
You only have to have one good limb for it. But yeah, I mean, that was probably like, I think in terms of YouTube views and engagement, that was like the best video I ever did. I never made a dime off it, whatever. But it's like, right,
well, that's okay. We can use that as an excuse to plug all of your content. So you got a YouTube channel, you got Raised on Rhythm on YouTube and on Spotify.
It's mainly the Raised on Rhythm now. That's the podcast, Raised on Rhythm on Spotify. You look it up on there. Raised on Rhythm on YouTube when I have the video from some of the interviews. raisedonrhythm.com. That's the website where all that stuff is cataloged, and you can find it all. Raisedonrhythm.com. Raised on Rhythm.
Cool.
That's the podcast. And then, I
Cool.
play drums at Blade Palace.
Does Blade Palace have a web presence, or you guys?
Yeah, actually, bladepalace.com again for that one. Look up Blade Palace on Spotify, YouTube. I don't think we have too much on there. I think we have our live session vids that we recorded last summer, which is just like us playing the songs live through in our basement, but with like full audio and video and everything like that. I was really happy to get those ones out too, because trying to just do something that actually like captures our live essence, whereas recordings I think are a little more not polished is the word I'm looking for, but it's like I love playing live with these guys. That's the main thing I think that we do. So having those videos out on YouTube we played 1919 in its entirety. So you can go look up Blade Palace 1919 on YouTube, and those videos should pop up. But yeah, we're looking forward to getting back to playing shows for real too. So
suddenly rocks rain.
Weren't you guys the band that had the beach balls going on?
Yes. That was Rob and Elliot. And we wouldn't like throw them out in the crowd to like the last song, that we were doing, usually be like Lethe or another one, Tangent, that's actually going to be on the upcoming record, but we have played it live. We've played that song live for a little while now, but we're just now getting around to recording it. But yeah, Elliot and Rob would always go nuts with the beach balls on the end. And I don't know if it really made us favorites at the Belltown Yacht Club, because that venue is like a small space, and like have beach balls bouncing around with the bar and stuff like that right over there. But
I could see that getting out of hand pretty quick.
But live shows have to have a little element of unpredictability there too. It can't just, you can't just be like up there just playing safe the whole time. I'm
a big fan of the beach balls. I had a great time throwing those around.
Yeah, man. I mean, it was always fun for us. And like I say, I think, it's cool when live shows just have like a little element of unpredictability in that way.
Absolutely. You're talking about, got a few more questions. So
yeah, go for it.
You're talking about getting back out there and stuff like that.
Yeah. I'm
just curious, have you guys spent much time on the road, or do you plan to in the future once all this kind of stuff wraps up?
I think at the end of the day for Blade Palace, I mean, we're all adults with this stuff, and we have day jobs and other stuff we do. So I don't think any of us really see it as like us ever being on the road for, months at a time and stuff like that. I don't think we really see ourselves as that kind of band, but be cool to do a West Coast run every summer or something like that.
Hell yeah, brother.
Have some fun. Yeah, man. So, yeah, we've talked to some people about, doing an Olympia show in Seattle and just kind of trying to get out around a little bit. We played the Missoula Psych Fest in 2019 in Missoula the night before we did the show at the Belltown Yacht Club for the Disconnect release. That was July 2019. And yeah, hopefully just getting back around and just playing live. Just give me I'll play in a parking lot at this point, the way I feel. Sure. You know what I mean? Just give me like a setup and let's go. Let's do this.
I'm kind of surprised that there hasn't been more stuff like that going on. I mean, maybe it is. I just don't know of it.
It's always a noise issue in Seattle,
Yeah.
Anytime. I mean, even venues have problems with that too, yeah, it's people want the excitement of live music. Everybody forgets that it's noisy. It's like it's loud.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, that's interesting. You brought up the Psych Fest. I I'm pretty sure Forrest Ray did that too, but I don't remember seeing you there.
I can't remember if y'all did that or not. Was that was maybe y'all might have been on the second day. That's probably why, because we were playing on the first evening. I think we were actually the first band to go on that first evening.
That was a really fun thing though.
It was a fun thing, man. And shout out to Josh for putting that on. And I've tried to message him every now and then throughout all this. He moved to Eugene after all that. And I don't know if he's going to be hopefully he'll be doing more fests like that down there. Something like that would be awesome to get down that way and play. But we had a great time out there. I think it was tricky for me and Chris. I think me and Chris actually dipped out. Like, I don't think we caught all of the second day. We just Chris had to get back to Portland and stuff like that. So we had driven over there. It was funny. We drove over there in like 2 Priuses because me and Rob both had Priuses. So it's like we didn't have a van or anything like that. But we just stuffed 2 Toyota Priuses full of gear, and we're just like driving from Seattle to Missoula, and we left right after the Belltown Yacht Club show, and Rob's Prius almost broke down right before we left. It was just like it picked like the worst time to have like check engine light issues or whatnot, and we were almost scrambling to like rent something else at like 2 a.m. trying to get out of Seattle, and then all of a sudden the light went away and it started working again, and we're just like, fuck it, just go dude. And we drove to Missoula that same night, like after the Belltown Yacht Club shows. It was a wild weekend.
Yeah, you guys must have like rolled out as soon as we rolled in, because I don't remember seeing you. But that was a really fun weekend. I still look back fondly on that. Not
for nothing, but I think for me too, a little bit of it was just like, I mean, I'm 34, but it's like, they're going to ask me, oh, do you want to crash on like the floor in the house with like 10 dogs and stuff like that? And I'm just like, if I have the option to drive all night and get back to my bed, I'll do that. Like, no disrespect, but
I'm in the same boat as you, man.
I'm good, bro. Like, yeah.
Did you ever road dog it though when you were younger? Like,
I really never did. I really never had the appetite for it. Dan from Spirit Award is somebody I think who really is like the opposite of that. He really he enjoys like the travel side of it as much as anything. I just like playing music. I like playing drums, and kind of the irony, even from people that I've known that have done that kind of full-time, touring gig and stuff is, a lot of it is like, you're not even really playing music. I mean, you're just playing like your band set for the half hour, whatever that you're on stage like once a day. And then the rest of the time is just like packing gear or, trying to make sure nobody steals your gear or, going to all these, towns and just, trying to find a cheap bite to eat or something like that. So the road warrior lifestyle in that way never really appealed to me. I don't think, and also the fact that, just frankly, like growing up in South Florida, like there were no bands that I was around down there that like had those kind of aspirations. I think.
Sure.
Just not like, I played in plenty of bands growing up, but, I never had that story of like, oh, I was roommates with the guy from this band or that band, and then they ended up touring and they needed a drummer, so they just called me or something like that. It's like, just cards didn't play out like that, but, we'll see. Never say never, but, I don't know. Like it wasn't something, I didn't seek out that part of it. I just wanted to play drums,
Yeah, it's interesting too, because like we were talking about earlier, when you're on the road, you almost become a worse drummer in all other aspects of besides playing your set.
Sometimes, on the opposite end of it, you have like a Blink 182 or something where, Travis can afford to have his own tour bus and then a kit set up, in addition to the kit that's on stage, like, and shred like that. That's a whole different, a whole different level of things, versus like I say, when you're on the road and, you just have like the one kit that's packed up and then you just have to spend the rest of the time sort of figuring out how to make the miles and the day go by.
I've definitely brought practice or practice materials like a practice pad and just the mindset of like, I'm gonna practice every day, and then you get on tour and you're just like, I'm tired.
Ever tried doing that in a van full of dudes? Like after they just got done playing a show, just like, bro, shut the fuck up. Like we just
it basically just sits in wherever you put it. It just sits there for the whole tour, and you're like,
pretty much, yeah. It's just like I say, like it's not. I'm sure like some people, are able to pull it off and stuff, but man, most of even some of the residency gigs I've done, I remember like, when I used to play at Metal Summit first, and I would try to get my kit set up early so I could get in an hour of practice, like in the venue or whatever, like before they opened up and stuff like that. And I think after about 2 weeks of that, my boss had to like come down and it was like, listen, you can't be doing that. You know, we got like bartenders complaining and stuff like that. And it's like, God damn, you know,
you're really only there for their amusement when they want it. So
anyways, maybe cut this part out. I don't know if I want
we might edit. I might edit
it. Or put it out, and then I get canceled. I'm canceled.
You sir have been canceled.
I've been canceled.
No, I don't think we're famous enough yet.
You have to be famous to get canceled.
Yeah.
One day
you have to be a real douche. You don't qualify as that. So
I'm somewhat. I you know, listen, we're all like a little douche. It's just to what extent, you know, or you know,
part douche.
Exactly, you know. But
well, I got a couple more questions.
Yeah.
I'm really curious to know a little bit about your, I guess, approach when it comes to recording, because you said you guys were doing your own recording, your own self-producing and all that. So are you pretty much dialed into recording drums and everything that goes into that?
Basically, and kind of how I got started with that was when I was about 18, 19, because I was in bands with friends of mine in South Florida. And, you know, the idea of paying like, so, you know, we didn't have record deals or anything like that. You know, so the idea of going and paying somebody like $60, $80 an hour plus at like a studio to lock out a professional studio was just really not in the cards. And frankly, I mean, we went through this experience. I'm sure a lot of bands have gone through this experience where you go to local recording studios. It's just like kind of a nobody walking in there. And you could almost tell that the engineer, whoever's doing the project, is just like booked this session just because they want to like kill time in between their like real projects, you know, whatever. They have budgets. And so they're like people don't even really give a shit about the music you're making. They're just like press, you know, they're just like glorified Pro Tools operators at that point. So like if we wanted to actually sound good, or if we wanted our music to come out the way that we wanted it to come out, we had to do it ourselves because nobody was going to care about it the way that we were going to care about it. And that's not to say we were great recording engineers. We were terrible. Like this was 2006. And so, I mean, this was even before, you know, YouTube tutorials and stuff where we had to just go on like tweakheads.com was the big site at the time, you know, or wherever we could just to try and get any information that would help us, you know, take these mics and stuff that, you know, we all bought at Guitar Center with like the money that we made waiting tables, you know, and like try to figure out how to use this stuff. So we basically just taught you know, me and a good friend of mine, Rich, like we taught ourselves how to record like that, you know, where we just had like the rehearsal space, the warehouse that I was in at the time. And, you know, we would just record ourselves, record the bands we were working on. That's how we learned how to record. And so, most of the bands that I've been in since then, I've just taken on, you know, that responsibility or worked with other people in the band that knew audio engineering too and stuff to do our own stuff. If I could do it all over again, I don't think I would do that. I think I would just, you know, I would just bite the bullet, but try to actually find like a producer that gave a shit.
Wow. Like,
interesting. Because like I think it's possible to do that, you know, when you record demos and stuff like that. We just were terrible about lining up production teams. I mean, a lot of times too, that's like kind of where record labels would come in back in the days. Like, you know, so and so did this project. Like, we'll send you to his studio and we'll hook you up with like this engineer or that guy, and you know they can like throw weight around in that way. So if I had to do it all over again, I don't think I would. I don't think I would do that. I think I would just focus more on, you know, on the songwriting and playing music. But the fact that, you know, like I say, that I, you know, had developed these skills over the years, most of the bands I've been in since, you know, we've always just recorded our own stuff in that way.
I mean, I have a deep respect for people who are able to do that. And obviously it has to be worthwhile at this point, right?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know, frankly, that sometimes that things would get done if we didn't do it ourselves.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Because there's, you know, keep it all the way real. There's nobody like jonesing at the bit in terms of record labels to like sign and put out, you know, a psychedelic garage rock band in this day and age. You know, the people that are like, you know, chasing artists for record deals and stuff like that. I mean, they're looking for like a teenage pop singer or something like that, you know, to invest in. So I think for us just doing things ourselves, I mean, that's kind of the only way we know how to get things done. And also because recordings now are just such a prereq for bands, just even to just play local shows, like you
Mhm.
try to hop on a bill or something like that, or even message a venue and it's like, well, send us your recordings. Like, I mean, it's been that way, I think for the last 10, 12 years now, where, just booking our own shows and stuff like that. It's like, you kind of had to do the recordings anyway, just to get anybody just to give anybody an idea of what you were doing as a band,
For sure. For sure. Well, okay, I have to ask you this question.
Yeah.
What's your stance on the dreaded or maybe beloved click track?
What's funny about this is we just did our first session with Blade Palace about a week and a half ago for what's probably going to be the upcoming full length. I want to tread lightly because Elliot, we haven't put anything out about that yet, but
Oh, awesome. Yeah. Spill the beans on my podcast, please.
I'll spill a few beans, but for that, it's interesting because we tried to take an approach where we just went into it, no click track, actually, just everybody collectively recording in a room, really just keep the bass and drum tracks, the rhythm tracks more than anything, and just kind of see how that worked out. And I think the results were mixed, if I'm being completely honest. Like when we heard playback, this is part of the difficulty of self-producing in that way, because almost when you have a producer, you want like a set of neutral ears in that way. It's like when you're a musician, anything you play sounds great because you're just having fun playing it.
Yeah.
It's like if you actually have to like listen back to it or a recording of it, you're just like, oh my God, that was like terrible. And you struggle with that too, because it's so fun in the moment sometimes, like I say, and then you listen back, with sober ears and you're just like, ooh, that was not good. So as far as click tracks go, I mean, I've definitely recorded a lot of songs in my life to click tracks. And I've had some stuff where there were MIDI parts that were on a grid. So my drums would end up getting quantized, anyway, because there was already a quantized part in the track. That's kind of the guideline, when we've recorded in Blade Palace, is like, okay, if there's already an element that's gridded in there, like a MIDI track or a synth thing, then, then the drums will end up just getting gridded to that. Cause I could sit there for the, the rest of the day as a drummer trying to land a perfect performance on every, hit with no bends or anything. But it's at the end of the day, it's just like, it is what it is. Most records, honestly, nowadays get like Beat Detective like crazy too and stuff. So, as far as, recording without click tracks, I think it's definitely helped on certain songs because, it's a more raw feel. We just have to be careful about not rushing during that.
Yeah.
Because, and this is an interesting thing to me that happens where you play music and as you play, your internal body clock almost kind of recalibrates to a faster tempo because your adrenaline's pumping and stuff like that. So I know I might be playing something and it's feeling very slow to me. And then when I listen to the playback afterwards, I'm like, that was rushing like crazy. When my ears sober up, after I'm like not playing anymore, when I'm like listening back with sober ears. So it's tricky in that way. Cause again, you'll record something in the moment with everybody and we're just like, oh my God, that felt great. Even with no click track. And then you listen back and it's like, oh God, I was just rushing so bad. Anyway, I know that's a long-winded answer, but I'm neutral on this subject of click tracks. I mean, I think it's a tool just like anything else.
Yeah.
And,
no, I think it's cool. I think it's interesting to hear what drummers in particular think about them.
I do think that's something I've noticed with a lot of bands that record in local studios. If they're new to the recording process, a lot of times engineers will just blindly sort of grid everything. And I give them the benefit of the doubt. Like I get why they do that because they don't want something coming out that sounds bad and then that's their name on it and stuff. But I think sometimes, local bands kind of struggle with that too, because it's like, they're just going to get gridded and overproduced, whether they like it or not, just because the engineer is so anal about, making sure that everything that comes out, sounds good and reflects good on them versus like what's appropriate for the music. And then also everything ends up kind of sounding the same.
Sure.
Like it all has that same feel where it's all been gridded and the drums get replaced with like the same, snare and kick samples that they've used for the last 10 records they've done
Oh,
and stuff
wow.
like that. So it can end up sounding kind of generic in that way. So that's almost like a tricky part. If you're trying to produce a record that I feel like actually stands out a little more and connects with people,
Yeah.
is like not just going the generic route or the easy route, but kind of mixing it up. Like, okay, we're not going to like we'll grid the drums, but maybe on like 85% instead of 100, or we'll replace like a snare sample, but we'll only mix in like the sample at half volume instead of just like, again, sort of mindlessly going through and replacing the stuff and quantizing it to where it just sounds so overproduced. I feel like there was a phase between like 2002 and 3 where like a lot of producers were getting out of control with the drum sampling because it was like a brand new toy at the time after like 98, 99 when Pro Tools really took off, and it was like, okay, like everybody just wants to grid everything and resample everything, and then it ended up just sounding so artificial,
Well, I mean, I think that's why it's cool that you guys are just self-producing, because you have total, I guess, control over all that stuff, which is
for better and worse.
Yeah, definitely the flip side of the coin, but
yeah.
But yeah, man. Well, let's plug your stuff one more time. You've got raisedonrhythm.com.
Raisedonrhythm.com. Raised on Rhythm is the podcast, the radio series, my all-around platform for Seattle bands. And that's my my labor of love, my pet project. And then I play drums in Blade Palace, and I just started filling in on drums for Peyote Ugly as well.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I played the 2 live streams with them last fall when we did that. That's so that's been a whole nother thing with that too. And yeah, I mean, between all those 3, most of my time is taken up pretty well these days.
Yeah, well, I think you're spending your time very productively. I think you've got a fantastic podcast / radio series. Big fan of Blade Palace, so keep up the good work. And I think we'll probably just wrap it up on that note. Dude, thanks so much for coming and talking to me, man. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on today. Appreciate it, Eric.
Yeah, dude. Well, keep in touch, and I'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good.
All right. Take it easy.
Peace.